Hello and welcome along to the Serious About Rugby League show. Happy New Year. This is the first episode of the new year for us. It's the same four people. So we've got Sam Cook, Sam Broxham, and Peter Smith from the Yorkshire Evening Post. Look, we're at another year. We're not far away from the start of a new season. In fact, this weekend we've got Challenge Cup first round action, so the community teams will be competing in that for a spot in the second round. We've also got the first round of the championship next week. Super League teams are in action this week in pre-season friendlies. I think we've got, weather permitting, obviously, but we've got St Helens, Warrington, Wigan all in action. But I think the place to start this week's episode is with Matt Dufty leaving Warrington. He was released by mutual consent on Wednesday evening, so that's 2 days after we're recording this. Sam B, it was a long-running saga, but does his exit come as a surprise to anyone?
No, I don't think it does. I mean, as you say, it started kind of last year with his attitude and then being dropped from the side. And then obviously this year he's not been given the number one shirt. That's gone to Kai Taylor-Ray. And I think he's just, too much of a personality and a bit too egotistical to be second choice. So I think he's made the move for him and for the club. I think what it does do is it puts a bit more pressure on Sam Burgess, because obviously he'd let this star man go, relying on Taylor-Ray at fullback, who has got talent, but he's not experienced in Super League. So, I think it's a risk, but one that Warrington needed to do. And then it also frees up a bit of cap space. So whether they go into the recruitment market or not, and it's a bit late into pre-season to do that now. But I think on the whole, it's a good move from Warrington and for Dufty as well. And obviously he returns to Australia, and if he can kind of revitalise his career over there, then who knows?
Yeah, Dufty's next steps beyond going back to Australia are unknown at this minute. But Sam C, in terms of Warrington's next steps, do you expect them to go into the market, or is it a case of waiting, keeping the powder dry and going big for a 2027 rebuild?
I think they'll be weighing that up. I think there's arguments on both sides. I think you look at Kai Taylor, and I think there's obviously immense talent, but the lack of experience, through no fault of his own, obviously he was injured for a lot last year. So, but when he has played, he's impressed. But it's a big responsibility being the number one. That in itself will have been a big responsibility. But now not having the veteran backup. I mean, I think obviously you're looking now really at wingers would be having to fill in at fullback if you were to have to replace Kai Taylor. So it makes sense if they went into the market. To be honest, they've maybe come up almost a week too late. I wonder if Jack Walker would have been someone who you could kind of bring in just as like a seasoned veteran. But I think obviously with Walker, he does want to be playing. But I think there's definitely a valid argument to suggest kind of just wait and bide your time. You don't have to spend it now. Players will get released throughout the season. I think you look at where they're potentially short. You look at prop, because obviously the signed Tavita Pangai Jr. and then there was the U-turn on that one. And then we expect George Williams to be leaving for the NRL next year. So is it a case of just you now have almost a 6-month head start on picking out who your prime halfback is for next year, and you funnel that Dufty money towards that? I think it makes sense on both sides. I think Dufty, for what it's worth, was at times I think it was 23, maybe. I can't remember if it was 20 or 24, but he was Man of Steel worthy at times. I think it's just a shame that it's not worked out for him there, but I think it's probably a sign of Warrington getting the culture in check, which is something that we've questioned for a while. So I think it's a positive move all around, but I think what it leads to is actually more exciting.
Yeah, Pete, how do you see it? I mean, looking at the spine, obviously Kai Taylor is an experience. You've got George Williams going to the NRL, and then obviously Mark Sneed and Danny Walker there as well at hooker. How do you see this? Do you think this impacts Warrington's chances of getting silverware this year?
Potentially they're losing a good player, aren't they? But they've known this was going to happen for a while. I don't think it's any sort of surprise. So I'm sure that they've got contingency plans in place. Warrington are a club that do bring people in whenever there's someone available. I'm sure they've got someone lined up. I don't think it'll affect them too much. I don't at the moment see them as being realistic grand final contenders or not grand final winners this coming season, although they'll be there or thereabouts in the Challenge Cup. As always, I think they're probably looking more towards 2027 for a Super League push. We shall wait and see. I think that the exciting thing about Warrington is the young kid Irwin who's coming through in the halves. From everything I've seen of him, suggests he's going to be a really, really good player. If they can hang on to him, I mean, they'll certainly be NRL interest. So I think that's something they've got up their sleeve. Warrington have sort of signed. Their recruitment's been less eye-catching this time than it often is, but I think they've made some decent, solid additions. I think Kalepi Tangino is a good signing for them. As much as anything else, he's coming from a good culture at Hull KR and a winning culture, and I think they'll be looking for him to have a big influence on the squad this year. I think they'll have a decent season, but as I say, I don't see them as challenging the likes of Hull KR and Wigan right at the top of things. But there'll be no pushovers, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them make another appearance at Wembley in this year's Challenge Cup. But it's very early days, isn't it? We're all speculating until we actually see players out on the pitch and see what coaches have got planned and how they're going to set the teams up. We don't know at this stage. That's why it's such an intriguing time of the season.
Yeah, well, on to one of the biggest stories over the festive period, and that's Salford RLFC. They're up and running now. They've got Mike Grady in as head coach. They've got Ryan Briley in as a CEO. They've signed 8 players at the minute at this time of recording. I'm expecting a few more to come through in the next day or two. Pete, firstly, just how pleased are you that Salford as a club exists again and they're approaching the start of a new season?
Well, we talked about this in the past, haven't we? Rugby League can't afford to be losing clubs, established clubs like Salford. I know technically this is a new club, but it's the Salford name still in Super League as far as we know. Rugby League obviously needs a presence in the Manchester area. There's Swinton, but they're also a championship club. I think it's a blow for Super League that there isn't a club in that area in the top competition at the moment. But it's just good for everybody concerned that there's going to be a Salford club next season. It looks like I know Mason Caton Brown a little bit from his time at Wakefield. I don't know that much about him as an administrator, but it looks like they've got good people involved. I think Ryan Brearley is an interesting appointment as chief executive. It's becoming a bit of a trend, isn't it, that clubs are appointing former players more or less straight out of their playing days to run clubs. Like Richard Milers seems to have done a decent job at Hull, and there's obviously Jamie Jones Buchanan at Leeds, and one or two others in the game. So that's an interesting development. They're looking at their recruitment. Obviously, it's tough for them at this stage because most clubs are, most players are sorted at this time of year. Their season starts next week, so they're behind the 8 ball there. They've signed players out of good systems at other clubs. A few players that played for them last year as sort of filling in a little bit. I think they're obviously going to find it very tough in the Championship, and as the relegated Super League team, they've got a tough draw. So they're not going to be winning every week this year. But I think fans will accept that. I think fans will just be pleased that they've got their club back. Obviously, a lot of the Salford supporters didn't feel connected with the owners who came in last year. the whole season was a complete disaster from start to finish. It didn't feel like their club, but I think it is again now, and that's a big thing for them. They just need to get through this season and start to build. I'm sure we'll see Salford back in Super League at some stage. It's going to take a year or two, I should think, but they can look at other clubs, or two of the clubs that have got promoted to replace them, Bradford and York, who've had similar traumas, both Phoenix clubs, effectively, and they're back up there, and I'm sure it'll happen for Salford. I hope it will. I've always enjoyed going to Salford, proper rugby league club, and strategically very important for the game. So all the very best to them.
Yeah, Sam, see, in terms of the Championship, Salford are one of the biggest names in there. But in terms of expectations, do they need to temper in a little bit in terms of, the players have had a pre-season, some of them haven't even been signed yet. There's a week to go until the start of the year. As Pete says, they're going to be behind the 8 ball constantly all year, you'd think.
Yeah, I mean, I think you almost have to take this season as just in terms of winning games and just finishing position. It's a write-off already. You just kind of survival is what they want. They just bring back that hope from fans, bring back the fact that there's trust from fans as well, and just get down to Salford to support them. I think that's what they've kind of got to do, breed that. Again, just rebuild the trust, because they're not going to be winning. With the squad they've got is going to be way off it. But you kind of know that it's a squad, and we saw it last year. It's a squad that's going to give everything in terms of playing effort, and that's all the fans ever ask for. But fans also ask for a leadership and an ownership that's responsible. And I think they've probably got that now. So it's kind of see how they can get through this year. And you almost have to, I mean, we're 9 days into 2026, but you have to kind of look at 2027 for them, really, which I think is quite a harsh reality. But I think there's people at that club that have to be realistic. And I think we've already seen that with Ryan Briley and the announcement that they're not going to run a pathways. It's not a popular decision because everyone knows that it's key to have pathways, and obviously a lot of those players were left without a club, etc. But they physically just do not have the money to run it. So it's a decision that has to be made, and I think they've kind of got the right people in place that are going to make the decisions that are important and will help. And I think that just sets them up really well for next year. This year, I think it may be similar to last year in the sense of you maybe get to, maybe if they get to 5 wins, I don't know. I'm not sure what's realistic. You look at maybe come later this month, obviously, for them. Can I get a win in the Cup? And then get a Super League team round 3? I'm not sure. But I think just to get part of the season, that's pretty much how they've got to look at it, really.
Yeah, Sam B, as I mentioned earlier, 8 signings so far. But a lot of them are former Salford reserve players, academy players. There's a couple of lads in who are former St Helens academy players. Not a lot of first team experience there at all. Would you expect some experienced names to come in over the next week or so? And obviously, we're talking. Ryan Braley told me last week that they're talking to Super League clubs. Loans are going to be big for them, aren't they, this year?
Yeah, there will be, and obviously there were last year. Obviously, they racked up about 70 players by the end of 2025, and whilst I don't think it'll be that many this year, I think there will be a lot of from Super League clubs. There is still, a lot of free agents on the market. You've got Brad Dwyer, who's just left Lee. That club. He's probably one of the most experienced Super League players that are a free agent at the minute. Depending on what happens with Everton Rovers and whether they form or not, you've got about 10 players there that will be without a club, so maybe they make the move. But yeah, I think on the whole, the squad itself is probably not as told what fan wanted in his first year. But as I said, it's just going to be a consolidation season this year, and then 2027 is when the real kind of progression can start to be made.
Yeah, well, they're obviously kicking off the Championship season next Friday night against Oldham at the Salford Community Stadium. It's a different looking second tier. Obviously, it's 21 teams at the minute with obviously League One and the Championship merging together. Pete, London Broncos, the team to beat for you this year?
Oh, well, looking at the squad, Yeah, absolutely. They've been signing players from NRL systems. They're building a squad capable of competing in Super League. Their aim, obviously, is to get up into the top competition in 2027. They look much stronger than their rivals. I can't really see who's going to challenge them this year. I wouldn't expect them to win every game, but they'll be going to most games as favourites. They're building some momentum, not just with the signings, but with what they're doing off the field. They've got people there now who know what they're doing, and that I think that there's a feeling among the people that are running London now that all London really had in the past was a team, and they're trying to turn it into a club now with things going on off the field and foundations being laid, and that's going to pay off. Obviously, it's going to be it's going to be better for them if they can have a winning team on the field, because that'll attract the fans. They're going to have that. I think it'll be very interesting. They'll get a home tie in the Challenge Cup, assuming they get to the third round stage. I think it's a pretty safe bet that they will. And it'll be very interesting to see how they get on against a Super League side at that stage. I don't think any of the Super League clubs in their first game of the season will fancy going down to Wimbledon and taking on the sort of side London have put together. They've got a highly rated coach in Jason Demetriou, as I say, some quality signings, some pretty big names who've played at a very high level, and they're going to be too good for practically everybody at that level, I think. And you'd have to say if they can back it up with similar progress off the field, it has to be a good thing for the sport. There's a massive untapped market down there, and with the right people running the club, which I think they've got, that there is vast potential for London. People are in two camps, aren't they? That they're in the we don't want those Southerners in our competition camp, or they're in the we need a strong London, and that's the way to take the game forward camp. And I'm very much in the latter. I'd love to see them back in Super League as soon as possible, and I think that will happen over the next 12 months.
Yeah. Sam C, in terms of their competition in the Championship, I know you've spoken to me a few times about certain clubs that you think might be dark horses this year. Give us a rundown of who you think might be up there.
I think if you look at last season, you've got Oldham, they're probably the standout. They've continued the recruitment. Obviously, now they've got new head coach, Sean Long left, Alan Kilshaw's in. Like I said, they've just signed Jack Walker, and they've still got a lot of players of Super League quality. I think that they're a given to be up there. I think Halifax obviously had a really good first season, and their coach last year, and I think they're probably set for another strong one. I think Widnes actually recruited really well. They've just lost Jake Mason's just left, which is a blow. But I think they've got enough positions to cover that. I think Nathan Connell from Salford, I'm not sure if he'll play on the fullback or on the wing, but I think he was a bright spot for Salford last year. So I'm excited to see how he goes. But in terms of like a bigger dark horse, I think Sheffield Eagles. I mean, I did say it last year, in fairness, and I think last year they finished either 10th or 11th. So it's potentially not that great a pick, but I think Sheffield have signed quite well. I think mainly because I think Craig Lingard's a really good coach. I think he was thrust in quite late in the piece last year, and it just never really got going. They never had the full pre-season, and then the injuries, and it never clicked. But I think a full pre-season with Craig Lingard, I think by merit of the fact they finished in the table than they're expected to, they'll get somewhat of an easier draw. They're kind of in that middle of the 21 teams. So I think they're quite an interesting position. Newcastle have obviously made a lot of signings, majority from York, who they've got a connection with. And obviously, by merit of them being 21st on that ladder, they get the easiest fixture. So I think with the 10-team playoff, I'm not sure whether they'll fancy it, but I think they'll be like, well, let's go have a go at it. Let's see how we can go. And I think that's kind of what makes the Championship so interesting this season. It is a 10-team playoff. Yes, once we get there, the teams that are in first compared to 10th will be vastly different, but in one-off games, anyone can beat anyone. I think it's a weird system. I think the problem that rugby league always has, if you try and explain it to someone else who's not in rugby league, it's quite hard to explain. But I think if you're actually ingrained in it, I think it's quite exciting. I think we're set up for one of the most interesting championship campaigns in a long time, providing that London don't just do what Lee have done in the past, what Wakefield have done in the past, and just walk away with it, and which we could well happen, to be fair.
Yeah, Sam C, anything to add to that in terms of dark horses? I know obviously Halifax reached semi-finals last year. Would they still be up there for you?
Yeah, I think there will be. They've got a couple of Super League released Super League players. Brought in Tanguy Zen from Catalan and Danakoro from Warrington. But I think the one that Sam C didn't mention was Doncaster. I think they're kind of my dark horses. They've brought in a few players of Super League quality. Muslim Mustafa, Connor Jones, who was previously at Featherstone, is now back in the UK. Tom Holmes from Bradford. And I think although the squad might not have the experience of, the likes of London and Oldham, they do have a lot of, especially second tier, and, the Championship is a different ball game to Super League, and I think that'll really help them next year. Or this year, sorry.
Yeah. Well, over the off-season, we've been looking at recruitment and in the Super League, taking a bit of a deep dive on clubs, and I think it's Hull FC's turn now. So we've had 8 signings at Hull FC. They've got Sam Lissoni, Jake Arthur, Joe Batchelor, Harvey Hill, James Bell, Arthur Romano, Connor Bailey, and Joe Phillips from Gould Vikings. Sam C, you were very glowing about Hull FC last time we recorded. Do you want to start us off?
I think what's not necessarily so good, but I think what's important about Hull FC's recruitment is it's very, very targeted. I think they realise that they've got an abundance of talent in their backs, specifically the young backs. They've also got the likes of Zach Hardacre, who was one of their best players last year. The backs are kind of ticked off. They brought in Arthur Romano, who's really good Super League quality. He has actually played in the second row a bit last year, but he's strong centre. So they have added to it there. They've not just sat on the laurels, but what they've done is gone and looked at the pack and thought, right, well, we really need to make some signings here. Sam Lissoni was one of the best impact props last year. I think he played every single game for Leeds. So you know exactly what you're going to get with Sam Lissoni. Harvey Hill he's come through the Wigan system. I think Wigan fans who watch, any fan who the 24 World Club Challenge saw him put in a brilliant display against Penrith Panthers. We've not necessarily seen that level consistently since, and I think the fact that he's hit that level before and he's still so young, I think is really exciting. I've got more question marks over the St Helens signings just in terms of injuries, and with James Moore and Joe Batchelor. But again, just in where they were last boy. And then to add on to it, they've got the likes of Connor Bailey and Joe Phillips, younger lads, who are also going to add to it. So I think, and then obviously I've not mentioned Jake Arthur there, who's going to transform the spine. You're going to get a settled spine of Price, Arthur, Caesar, and then Burrow with Custer as a utility. And I think, like I said, there's a clear directive there. They've said, right, we need to improve our pack, just consolidate a little bit in the backs, and then we've gone and brought in the start half. And I think it's a recruitment period where previously, well, FC specifically, but a lot of teams kind of take a scattergun approach sometimes. And I think it's kind of like who's available. This feels like a recruitment window that was plotted out long before. This feels like the recruitment window that was plotted out when Richie Marler came in charge all the way back in 24, was it? I think it's calculated, and I think it's very strong. Again, my fears would be with the St Helens players, because obviously you've already got William Lapark, Lee Houston for long injury. Jed Cartwright's not proven an ability to stay there. Liam Knight also had some injury issues last year, so I think when you're adding 2 more bodies in that are potentially injury concerns, then that is concerning. But they have added bodies to that pack, which is the main thing, and some of the bodies they've added are of top quality. So I think it's, if you were grading it, I'd be looking at it as like a B. I think it's quite a strong set of recruitment, to be honest.
Yeah, Pete, I'll come to you about one of the high-profile ones, Sam Lusoni. He's going to be a handful, isn't he? And pair him with Herman Essiese when Essiese is back from his Achilles injury. That's they're going to be a force to be reckoned with, are they?
Potentially, SAS is obviously a quality player. He was up there in the Man of Steel rankings early last season, wasn't he? Before he got injured. Sam Lusoni is an interesting one. As Sam said, he played every game last year, all of them off the bench. I didn't think he started the season particularly well for Leeds, and I didn't think he finished the season particularly well for Leeds. But in the middle, he was very, very hard to handle. At that stage, he was playing for his future. He's on a 2-year contract. The concern will be, is he going to maintain that level every week? If he does, and if he plays to the level he's capable of, he's going to make a real impact for them. He's such a tough guy to hold when he gets going. He didn't play a lot of game time, so there's a little bit of a luxury. He's going to sort of get 15 minutes either side of half time, and then another spell later in the game. He's not an 80-minute prop or anything approaching that. But as Sam says, they've targeted their recruitment. They've brought him in for a reason. They've got a tech job for him. They've got a good coach there who knows what he's doing. And I think if he can get to Sam Lusoni and can get the best out of him, then that's a very good addition. Yeah, I think Phillips is an interesting one. He came through Leeds' academy and was quite highly rated there. Dropped down to Gould for more game time, and now is back in Super League with Hull. And I've not seen an awful lot of him, but from what people have said to me, his time at Leeds, somebody with good potential. We're not going to see much of him this year, I wouldn't imagine, but he might just be one to watch out for in the future. I think very young as a prop, but got a lot of potential.
Yeah, I imagine he'll be one knocking on the door when injuries, if and when injuries strike there at Young.
I think that's the key point about Hull. They, for some reason, certainly over the last few years, they seem to be one of those kids that have had a lot of injuries, unfortunate injuries. The key for them is keeping everybody fit. If they can keep their first 17 or near to that on the field for most of the season, then they're going to be up there challenging certainly for top 6 and maybe dark horses for the top 4. So I think keeping everybody fit and winning home matches is really key for Hull this year.
Yeah, Sam B, do you agree? Can Hull FC get a top 6 spot this year?
Yeah, I mean, they were only 1 point behind Wakefield in 2025, so it's certainly an opportunity. I think we've spoke about the recruitment, but I think the thing that is also key for them is the players that they've currently got. They've obviously got Will Price, who came in mid-season. He'll have a full pre-season under John Cartwright. He'll be the starting fullback. There were positional switches between the halves and fullback for him last year. I think with a cemented position, he can really nail that down. We mentioned it. Herman Essiese, John Asiata, once they come back, I think the pack will be looking really strong. And if they can keep them bodies on the field, there's no reason why they can't. And I think what that alludes to is the Super League competition next year is going to be really competitive. You expect Warrington to improve, you expect Catalan to improve, and you've probably got about 7 or 8 teams that are in contention for them playoff spots. And I think by the end of the season, we could have some really tight battles on his hands.
Yeah, just as a last point, Pete, there's 1 or 2 bits of news coming out of Leeds this week. Obviously, yesterday we had Alfie Edgell, his new contract. Talk to us about
that. That's something that Leeds have been working on for a while. They're going through the process of dealing with players who are out of contract at the end of the season. There's quite a number of them. I think at one stage it was something like 17. We've dealt with 1 or 2 of those now. The timing of the Edgell one's interesting because I don't think there was ever any doubt that he'd be staying. He's highly thought of at Leeds, and he's a Leeds Leeds fan. He's come through their system. He wants to be at Leeds. But the time is interesting because he's also been ruled out for up to 16 weeks with a thigh injury suffered on Boxing Day against Wakefield. That's really bad luck for him because he broke through into the first team at the end of 2023, did well coming in 2024, but last year he had a bit of an injury nightmare. He had a broken jaw in pre-season and then suffered a stress fracture of the foot in a game against Wakefield at Wakefield in July. So he only played 8 games last year, but when he came in, they preferred him to Riley Lum on the wing, and they like him. He scored a lot of tries when he came in. He's a good finisher, strong player, young with a lot of potential. It's a blow for Leeds because he can cover a number of positions, fullback and the wing and centre at a push. That they don't have a lot of experience covering Leeds' squad. So I think losing somebody at this stage of pre-season is a bit of a blow. It's an opportunity though for somebody like Riley Lum or one of the young kids who hasn't had a first team chance yet to come in if either of the wingers gets injured early in the campaign. Ryan Hall, obviously, I think he's 38 now, so I don't know whether they'd be expecting to get a game per week out of Hawley. And Mike Acevo's not played for a year with his knee injury, so that's a bit of a concern for Leeds. But on Edgehill, I think he's one for the future. He just needs to get over this run of injuries he's currently enduring.
Yeah, we spoke about Cam Smith last time we recorded, but just give us a rundown of who else do we need to be watching in terms of their contract situation at the club.
Well, there's a lot of them. They've done deals with people like Lockie Miller, who was obviously one of the priorities. He's now got a new contract in his back pocket, as has Cooper Jenkins, the other who came over last year and did really well and in his first season in the top flight, and he's somebody who's going to get a lot better over the coming seasons. I think there'll be obviously Jake Connor as well is now on a long-term contract, so we'll have to see how that affects his form, but I think that's the relief for Leeds that deal is done. But Brodie Croft is in the final year of his contract. They've got obviously Ryan Hall. He's expected to retire at the end of this year. Callum Watkins, 34, was very influential for Leeds last year. He's only got this season left on his contract. Keenan Palacia, I think, will be a priority for them. Came over from Gold Coast Titans bit of last season and was very good, very consistent. He's actually replaced Cameron Smith in the 13 jersey. Cameron Smith, testimonial this year, dropped down the squad number order, which is obviously a blow for him, but that's a legacy of last year's injury problems. He's in the final year of his contract. Jared O'Connor, who's now the first choice number 9, he's in the final year of his contract. So they've a lot of experienced players in pivotal positions who are in the final year of the deal, and they'll want to get that sorted sooner rather than later. I think I think 1 or 2 announcements are in the pipeline. They're pretty confident that they're going to keep most of the people they want to keep. But it's sporting director in Blees has got his hands full at the moment, looking at both retention for 2027 and recruitment. He was in Australia recently, and that sparked speculation about whether Leeds would be bringing anybody else in. But that was a trip to look at the season after this one, at the 2027 season. So I think there'll be 1 or 2 interesting signings coming up for Leeds as well. But the initial priority is around the re-signings, and there'll be plenty of those over the next few weeks, I think.
Yeah, right. That will do us, I think. Thank you for watching. If I can ask you to like this video and subscribe to the channel, that would be very much appreciated. It really helps us out. We'll be back very soon with a new episode as we build up to the start of the season. Thank you very much. much for joining us. Please like and share, and we'll see you next week.